I'm not an Aboriginal person. I'm not a First Nation person. But I am a treaty person, and so are you. In the year 2000, I had the opportunity to meet a Blackfoot elder named Rufus Goodstriker. Rufus was an amazing man. He was best known in his later years as a healer, a traditional herbalist, and ceremonialist. In fact, so well known that when the best known oncologist in Los Angeles came down with cancer himself, he sent his private Learjet to Lethbridge to pick up Rufus to fly him to California to provide treatment for him. One day when I was in Rufus's presence, he was wearing a large silver amulet, a modern day piece of jewelry. But I could tell that it had a story, and it had 4 colored stones set at the cardinal compass points, and around it was a series of engravings. And when I asked him, what does this mean? What does it represent? He said, this represents a Blackfoot legend that is pre-contact. In other words, prior to Columbus making landfall in the Americas. And he told me what the stones represented and the engraving represented. So he said, the stones represent 4 races of people and their gifts to the world. He said there's a black race whose gift is rhythm and music, a yellow race whose gift was medicine and healing, a red race whose gift was connection to the Creator and to Spirit, and a white race whose gift was to bring harmony to all the rest. And when he told me that, I began to laugh. And I said, we've done a really poor job at that up till now. And he just paused and he looked at me and he made direct eye contact and he said, you still have time. And that's the reason I'm here today. That's the reason I chose to apply to TEDx when I saw it was coming to Canmore. Because I wanted to tell the story of treaties and to tell them in a way that will challenge how you think about them. Because I would hazard a guess that most of you have never thought about the fact that you are the other half of treaty. We're either on one side of it as a First Nation person, or we're on the other side of it as a Canadian, the rest of Canada. We happen to live right now in Treaty 7 territory. Canmore is in Treaty 7 territory. And Treaty 7 is the treaty that was made with the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is really 3 nations of Blackfoot-speaking people. The Blackfoot proper, or Siksika, the Bloods, or Kainai, the Piikani, or Pagan, and 2 other peoples, the Nakota, Stoney people, who live just to the east of us here, and the Tsuut'ina. And the Tsuut'ina are Dene people, and they are connected by language and heritage to the Dene of the north, as well as the Dene or Diné of the southern US, the Navajo people. They're the people that were left behind. So you have this grouping of people who made treaty with Canada. Now, we have a different situation in this country than existed in the United States. The United States conquered in a military way the Aboriginal peoples and then dictated terms of treaty to them. In Canada, we had a government who decided they weren't going to spend the kind of money that military campaigns took, and they negotiated around a board table in a metaphorical way. The treaties were negotiated with First Peoples. So from the Manitoba-Ontario border west, we have the numbered treaties 1 through 7 in the southern part. So part of the Canadian dream, the Canadian initiative to build a nation from sea to sea, really was dependent on creating treaty with the indigenous peoples who lived in the right-of-way, or where they wanted to put the railroads through and where settlers wanted to come in. So they came in and they negotiated in a tactic that was to present their position in the hardest possible way and then make some concessions. So if any of you have read some of the language of the treaties, the numbered treaties, it talks about in a very flowering way about as long as the sun shines and the rivers flow and the grass is green. And you might think those words come from the First Nations people. Those words were written by Treaty Commissioner Laird, who negotiated a number of the numbered treaties. The big message I want to leave with you and deliver about the treaties is that there are rights and obligation that flow from the treaties to both sides of the treaty. What flows to us as the non-First Nation side of the treaty is everything we have. All wealth flows from the earth. Ultimately, it originates from the earth. Our right to be here flows because of treaty. We couldn't be here. We couldn't live, those of us who live in this beautiful town of Canmore, we couldn't be here unless Treaty 7 existed in the way that it was negotiated. So think about that. Think about what flows to you. We've heard people, I hear people say on an almost daily basis that the treaties happened well over 100 years ago. It's time to forget them. They're archaic. Why are we sending these First Nations people all of this money? Well, that's our side. That's our obligation. That's what we pay forward for the right to be here in this beautiful, beautiful place and in this land. It's two-sided. We need to think about that in a new way. The people who say that it's time for the treaties to end, who of those people would voluntarily give up everything that has flowed to us as our reception of our right from the treaty? Who would give that up in order not to pay forward that money? And I would suggest no one. I would suggest no one would do that. People have all kinds of misconceptions about what flows to First Nations treaty or First Nations people because of treaty. They believe that all education is free. They believe that all kinds of things are there, and it truly isn't. They have budgetary constraints. They have dedicated stovepipes of money. They have more money allocated to social services than they do to economic development, and they can't spread the money from one to the other. So their side of it doesn't serve them in a meaningful way in that regard. So what flows to them is our paying forward monies to support them in various ways, and what flows to us is everything else that we have. I want you to begin to think about the treaties in a new way. Think about your life in a new way. Think about being in Canmore in a new way, that we're here because of the treaty. Across the valley on that side is a range of mountains that we all call the Three Peaks, Hauling and Lawrence Grassy and Ship's Prow. How many of you know that the original name for that is Ahage Nakota? It means the last Nakota, the last human being. This is where we live. We're here as a gift to us from that part of treaty. So I want you to move forward to the future. I want you to look at treaties not as an anchor to the past, but as a bridge to the future. And I want to challenge you to go beyond. You still have time.